Thank you, John. Hi, everyone. My name is Pelin, and as John mentioned, I'm the pre-sales consultant for Graphisoft. I've been with Graphisoft for 5 years, and I'm an architect as well. So in today's webinar, I'm just going to have 3 parts. The first part is going to focus on just the basics, the essentials, what you can do in ArchiCAD, how easy to learn, how intuitive it is, and so on. And in the second part, I'm just going to focus on the workflows in ArchiCAD. So how you start up a project from scratch, from a conceptual design stage, and you make your way all the way to the construction stage as well. And the third part is going to focus on the collaboration with the other disciplines. So I'm mainly going to focus on IFCs and the translators and so on. So hopefully we'll manage it within 40 minutes today. So I'm just going to start with the first part. As you can see on my screen, I'm just going to use our HQ building in Budapest for the first part of the demo. What you can see here is on the left side, this is what we call the toolbox. So under design, you still have 3D tools like walls, windows, columns, beams, slabs, and so on. Under documents, this is where we have the 2D tools. I'm in 3D, so that's why they're grayed out. But this is your annotations, so your dimensions, text labels, all the 2D tools like lines, polylines, and fills, and so on. All your markers, sections, elevations, details, they're here under document. And we got more tools here. This is to do with, because we got the latest cinema for the rendering engine, so the latest Maxon engine, we've got the lamp tool here, which will be quite useful for your internal scenes in case you want some light sources on your renders. This could be quite useful for your RCPs as well. That's why we got the camera tool. So you can again adjust your scenes to a certain angle to be rendered natively in ArchiCAD without having to import and export them into third-party softwares either. If you place multiple cameras in ArchiCAD, you can actually do fly-through, so you could just save out MP4 movies. So when you do presentations about your building, you just run it on the background. On the left side, this is what we call the navigator. So we have 4 icons at the top. So the first one is, I'm on the first one at the moment, which is what we call the project map. So this is where you got your stories. Once you cut your markers, your section markers, this is where you'll see your sections. Once you cut your elevation markers, this is where you'll see the elevations. We got interior elevations here. Anything coming from external sources, we got worksheets like independent paper spaces for you to work on. We got our details here. If you want to switch to 3D, this is where you switch to. We got our schedules here as well. So everything is happening within the project map. The second icon is what we call the view map. So from the project map, you save different views from the same source, like the ground floor, let's say, with different properties assigned to them. So it could be your architectural 1 to 100 existing ground floor, or 1 to 100 proposed ground floors, electrical ground floors, structural floor plans, fire resistance floor plans. So it's the same ground floor, but there's different properties assigned to them. And the third icon is what we call the layout book. This is your paper space. So this is where you place all your drawings onto. This is where you're going to have your title block information as well. And ArchiCAD straight from the box comes with a standard template, so UKI, UK and Ireland template, in which you have the British standards already predefined. So it's BIM level 2 ready, already coming from the standard template as well. So when it comes to drawing, project numbering, drawing numbering, when it comes to revisioning, when it comes to MBS annotations like uniclass, layering, and classifications. So they're already coming within the standard template. So this is our third icon. And the last one is, after you're ready with your layout sheet, so it's time to issue your drawings as DWGs or PDFs, or if it's a BIM level 2 project, your exchanges through IFCs with the other disciplines. So that's where you go as well. So there will be the number of publisher sets for you to be publishing as different file formats as well. So I'm going to just switch back to my ground floor here. And let's start with the essentials. So I'm just going to have a small extension to the side of that building here. So just going to zoom in here. Let's start with the conceptual stage. So I don't know what the wall build-up is, even though I've got the other walls, the existing walls already in composites. I'm just going to go with a single skin wall with a certain thickness assigned to it. So I'm just going to use my wall tool and let's start drawing. You will notice as soon as I start drawing, it comes up with dashed blue lines, which are my ortho. So these are just for me to be locked in horizontal or vertical. So I'm just going to follow those dashed blue lines. And I'm just going to double click to finish it off. So I placed 3 walls, 3 straight single skin walls. Let's see what I have placed in 3D. So this is a big model, and I'm just interested in the extension that I'm working on at the moment. So that's why in ArchiCAD, we've got a tool called Marquee, which will give you partial 3D cutaways. So if I just place a marquee around wherever I have worked and switch to 3D now, you will notice instead of the entire building, I can now focus on the bit that I'm working. It's easier to navigate as well, in case you're working with big commercial projects. So what I can do now, everything in ArchiCAD is editable, so I don't need to replace my walls with new wall types or with new geometries. So if you want to incline this wall, I just click on one of those walls, click on one of the nodes at the top, and it will come up with a pet palette here. This is my editing palette, and you will see the last option is modify angle. You will also notice I can just incline my wall in 3D. So when you're editing your elements, you don't need to stick to 2D. You can do your editings in 3D as well. So once I incline things, the other walls around me, the adjacent walls, will trim themselves as well. So I don't need to worry about trimming. Let's make it a little bit more playful. So let's have this same wall both inclined and curved at the same time. So for this, I'm going to click at the bottom, and you will see another pet palette appears. In which I have different editing options. So I could go for the second one, which is called Curve Edge. And I can curve this wall now. And you will see again, the adjacent walls will follow the changes as well. So I can both have now curved and an inclined wall. Let's undo those. The first time I placed those walls, they were automatically linked to the story above me. So these are just single story walls at the moment. But if I highlight all my walls, and if I want these walls to go all the way to the second floor or the third floor and so on. So again, I click on the top. Sorry, let's go here. And you will notice there's the stretch height command. And when I stretch them in 3D, you will also notice that I can snap to the story levels that I defined previously. So let's go all the way to the second floor. So this is a 2-story extension. I'm going to go back to my ground floor now. And let's punch some windows onto these walls. So I'll just double click on the window tool. Again, within the standard template in ArchiCAD, it comes up with a standard library in which you have your furniture library, so object library, and you have your openings library in which you got the windows, doors, and the skylights. So within the standard window library, you see that I have all these predefined window types that I can start with. They're all fully scripted and parametric, so when you do editings, they won't get distorted, so you can just change the width and the height and the sail height and so on. You will also see there's different folder structure here in which I have different types of windows. Again, these are all predefined, so you can start with these. That's why I'm going to go for a basic window 22, and let's start with window 22. Under the preview and positioning, this is where you see how it's going to look like in the actual model. Everything in ArchiCAD, so all the openings and the objects, they have 3 levels of detail. So once you punch them, you don't need to worry about changing the representation when you change scales. So if we're in 1 to 100, this is exactly what I'm going to see. If I was in 1 to 200, I would only see maybe just the outlines or just one single line to represent the same window. If I switch to 1 to 50, then it will get into further detail in showing the frames and the sashes and so on. So it's the same window, but it changes the level of detail according to the scale. This is how I'm going to see it on the elevation. Do you see this preview picture looks slightly different than the preview picture of the default window 22? That's because I've already placed I've changed some window settings. So I've started with window 22, but as you can see, I've added some boards and sills. I've added some cavity closures or masonry arch. I added some transoms, upper and lower transoms, and sashes and so on. So these are all coming from the basic window settings. When I click on board, you will see that there's my pictorial drop-down list. So anything that's related to the window tool, you assign it from here. So sill, board, cavity closures, masonry arch, lintels, whatever you can think of, they're all here. Like I said, they're quite pictorial, so you know what you're placing before you're placing. If I go for the sash options, with the sashes, you can just have a combination of panels or vents or openable windows or fixed windows and so on. So as soon as I change something here, so let's go for a transom sash to be solid panel. You will notice in the preview picture, if I switch to the 3D, you see that it just adjusts itself. The preview picture updates itself according to the changes I make. So again, if I just go back to the sill settings, by default, everything will be unticked, but once you start ticking things, you see it gets into further detail. So you can here define what type of sill it is it brick, is it stone, is it metal? And the same thing with the board, and with everything that you define, you just keep ticking, and then once you keep ticking those options, you just need to define in further detail the exact dimensions. So let's assume that I am finished with this. If you want to save this, so I spent 15 minutes to get the window sorted. If you want to save this as your favorite, so as your window type that you're going to use in most of your projects, so as part of your object library, this is what we call favorites in ArchiCAD. So I can click on this little star button at the top, and if I go for the star plus at the bottom where it says new favorite, I could just type this as, I could just give it a name as type A, type 1, whichever name you go for. And from now on, ArchiCAD will remember these settings. These are all fully editable. So in case you forgot something, you can still go into it and edit it. But saving a favorite allows you to import, export those objects between projects as well. And because I saved it as a favorite, instead of going through a long list of windows, if I say OK now, right next to my tool, there's going to be a small arrow, and that will give me my favorites list. So they're easily reachable as well through the favorites. So I'm just going to double click on type A, and I'll start punching them onto my walls. So the first click to place windows is when it comes up with a sun shape, is where's outside. So where do you want to put the sill? You can see that wherever I drag my mouse, the sun shifts to that position. So I'm going to click on the outside face of my wall. And the second click is the hinge. So is your window opening inside or outside, and which side? So let's keep it opening to the inside. And I'm going to have now a couple of copies of that same type A window. I don't have enough space, but let's just drag them slightly like that. That's better. So let's see what we have placed again in 3D through the marquee tool. So I'm just going to switch the 3D. Let's rotate. And there you go. These are my 3 windows of the same type. But now, the nice thing about ArchiCAD, like I previously showed you with the wall tool, everything is fully editable in ArchiCAD. So if I just want to highlight one of those windows and change it into type B, and I haven't saved type B as a favorite previously, you don't have to. I can literally click on any of those nodes. Do you see? I can vertically stretch this window. I can horizontally stretch this window as well. And you would have guessed now, the changes that I made has only affected the window that I highlighted. So we say ArchiCAD is instance-based. So whichever instance you highlight will get affected. So all those windows that I didn't highlight, they're still type A, so they haven't changed their shape, but just the only window that I highlighted has been updated. I can now save this as type B. So let's go to the settings of this window. I could save this as another favorite, type B, so that easily, if I say OK to this now, easily I can highlight my remaining windows, and through the favorites, I can just double click on type B and change them to be type B as well. So this is the power of the favorites. Or I didn't need to save it as a favorite. You can pick up any parameters of any elements in Arcade. As you can see, my arrow has changed into a pipette now to pick up the parameters. And you can inject it. Again, you can see that my arrow is now a syringe. So you can inject it to any elements again, one by one. So I could have gone this way as well. Another nice thing about this instance-based editing is, let's assume that this is an existing building. It's a refurbishment project, and this is my existing window, and I want to demolish it and propose a new window type. So instead of a single window, let's go for a triple window with side transoms on each side. So I don't know the width and the height of this building. I don't know the sill, of this window. I don't know the sill height. I don't want to demolish the sill and the boards. I want to keep them as they are. I don't want to demolish the masonry arch either. I just want to literally switch from one type of a window into another type. So in this case, I'm going to highlight this window. I don't need to go into the settings and write down all the positioning and the dimensions of these of this window. So I'm simply going to pick up the parameters with my pipette tool, go into the settings of this window, and from the library, again, I'm assuming I haven't saved a favorite of my proposed window previously, which you don't have to. So I'm going to scroll down and find that triple window with side transoms. If I now, before clicking on the preview picture, do you see I can actually inject the parameters that I have pipetted from the actual model? So if I just click on this preview picture now, if you look on the preview picture at the right side, you see that everything, all the properties of that window has been kept. It's just the type has been changed into the triple window. So I can say okay to this now, and now this is my proposed design, proposed window. That means it's my proposed elevation. So now I can save this later on after I made the changes as another favorite as my proposed window, let's say. So as you can see that everything is very editable, it's very intuitive, easy to change. You don't need to write down anything. So it's quite intuitive. So let's continue with our design. Let's continue with the slabs, with the floors. So this is probably my favorite tool in ArchiCAD. So again, we're going with a single skin slab because I don't know what the build up for my floors either. We're still on the conceptual stage. With the slab tool, this is an easy shape. It's a square or a rectangular building. So I could just go corner by corner and place my slab. But you will notice now my arrow changes into a magic wand. Like I said, this is my favorite tool. This magic wand works with all the tools in your toolbox in ArchiCAD. So in case you have an enclosed area, like I do now, I can click anywhere on the inside of that enclosed area, and you will notice that the ArchiCAD will place the same shape of a slab within that enclosed area. Just to prove the power of magic wanding, I'm just going to go for a more complex shape, and let's curve a couple of those walls as well to make it more interesting. Okay, again, if I highlight my slab tool, I could have gone corner by corner. I could have curved the edges later on, but that would have taken me a while. But again, if I use my magic wanding tool, ArchiCAD again will automatically place that slab exactly the same shape. Like I said, this magic wand works with most of my tools in ArchiCAD. So if you want to place a pitched roof on top of this building, again, if I click on my magic wand tool, you will see that it will give me a visual feedback of the pitched roof that it's going to place later on in 3D. Yep. So let's delete these now. So I've already placed my slab. This is my ground floor slab. I'm just going to copy this one and paste it to my first floor. Anything that you copy from anywhere, when you paste it, ArchiCAD will automatically paste it right on top, wherever you copied it from. It comes up with a marquee around it. So to finish pasting, I'm going to click anywhere outside the marquee. So let's double check with a marquee again what I have placed in 3D. Okay. So I was in the conceptual stage. Let's see if I now switch to a planning stage. So if I now know what the build-ups are for the walls and for the slabs. So I'm gonna highlight all my walls again. I'm not gonna delete them and replace them with composites. I'm literally going to go to my structure, and instead of a basic window, I'll go for the composites, and whichever composite that you previously defined in ArchiCAD, then they will change into that type of composite. If I now make this wall properly join, you notice that each skin of this composite will do different intersections with the skins of the adjacent wall. Just by looking at this composite now, by the way, my plaster is on the outside, but that's not the end of the world. Let's just highlight those walls and let's just flip them quickly and bring them back to where they were. So in case you create a build-up for your walls or columns, for slabs and so on, if the skin order is wrong, there's an option to flip in ArchiCAD, so you can easily correct things. So just by looking at this T-junction now, I can tell that my brick is the strongest. So what we have in ArchiCAD for each materials that you use in your build-up, we have intersection priorities. So when I highlight this composite, if I go to my materials, you will see that each material has a certain intersection priorities. That means anything strong is going to cut anything weak. By default, again in the standard template, all the finishing elements like plasters, metals, wood, and so on, they're all weaker automatically than the structural elements like the concrete, brick, insulation, and so on. So by default, when you cut a section line, you will actually see the correct representations of your intersections of your slabs and your walls. So I was right. Just by looking at this junction, I said the brick was the strongest because nothing else can cut through and join with the other skins on the other side. So in case you want the insulation to go all the way through and join with this insulation, or the other way around, so in case you want the airspace to go to cut through the brick and join with the airspace, you just need to make sure that the air is stronger than the brick. Yeah, so these are just sliders. It starts from 0 to 999. There's no right or wrong numbers. They just need to be stronger. That's it. This will affect your entire model, by the way. So it's a global setting. So all your bricks will be weaker or all your insulations will be stronger. So if I make my first floor slab to be a composite as well, so let's go for the composite option and let's go for one of those 15 centimeter ground floor finish. In real life, obviously, this slab needs to go all the way to where this block finishes. Then you have the continuous insulation and airspace. It's not the end of the world again, because when I magic wanded it, it just magic wanded itself to the inside face of my overall composite. I'm just going to click on any of the edges, and I can now offset all the edges of my slab. And you will notice I can now snap to the skin separators of my composite as well. So let's double check now in section how the skins interact with each other. So I'm going to use my section marker. I already have a section marker placed here. So let's just go for the section 8. There you go. Do you see now? Even though this composite goes all the way to where block finishes, the block is the strongest. So this insulation cannot go through the block. Same as these screeds and the floor finishes and so on. But they're stronger than the plaster. So plaster is always going to be cut by whatever element you got coming from your composite slabs. So if I change into different composites, you see that different skins do different interactions. So that's, again, like I said, that's through the intersection numbers, those sliders of each building material that you use. Right. So far, I was all the time in an architectural floor plan. In ArchiCAD, we have something called graphic overrides. So through the graphic overrides, you can graphically change the representation of your elements both in 2D and 3D. So what I've got here is my architectural floor plan. So there's no override that I have applied at the moment. So I can see all my wall build-ups, all the skin separators and everything. What if you wanted a structural floor plan? So you want all the walls or all the elements that have been tagged as load-bearing elements to be black, and anything non-load-bearing or undefined to be white. So that's possible with the graphic overrides. Do you see? I can apply a rule, an override rule in 2D and 3D as well, so that any element, so if I highlight one of those external walls and go into the settings of those external walls, any properties that you tag your elements with, you can override them graphically. These properties, so by default, ArcCAD elements come with certain properties like acoustic ratings, U values, fire resistance, and so on. But you can insert any properties you want that's coming from the manufacturers, you know, the product information, the manufacturer's information, serial numbers, the warranties, and so on. So if I look at this black walls properties, do you see it's been tagged as load-bearing element as a structural function? Whereas if I highlight one of those partition walls and go to the settings, you will notice it says undefined. So according to the element information, I have defined my rules to be black and white. What if you wanted a fire resistant floor plan? So if I go for my fire resistance, again, do you see some of my walls are now color coded? That's again coming from the properties that you tag them with. So if I go to the settings of that wall, do you see for the fire resistance, it says 60 minutes. So probably within my rules, I said 60-minute walls are in peach color and 90 minutes wall are in red color, 30 is orange, and so on. So you can define whatever rules you want. The same graphic overrides, these are the 2D graphic overrides, but if I want to apply a graphic override in 3D as well, so without any override, this will be the model that you will see. Okay, so this is the model that you're working with. But what if you wanted to work in a white model without having to render it? Because sometimes, rendering takes quite a long time and you don't want to wait for it. You actually want to work in a white 3D model. So by applying a graphic override saying that all the elements in 3D are white, I can actually work on a white technical looking 3D model as well with all the shadows applied to it. What if you want to go back to university? So you can apply balsa wood looking models, you can have cardboard looking models, so you can apply any material. It could come from internet, you could take the pictures of it, so any surfaces that you want to apply in 3D, you can have those within the graphic overrides as well. They're quite useful for model checking purposes too. So in this example, this is just my ground floor of that project, and I have certain number of doors. I don't know which door is what, and according to the regulations, let's say the minimum width for a door is 800, so I can't have anything less than 800, and I want to check if all my doors comply with it. So obviously through the schedules I can check them, but we are architects, right? We want to see things visually. So I could create a rule again within my graphic overrides, which I've already done, which is called door regress check, in which I just said the element type is a door and the width is less than 800 mil. Can you please highlight them in red in 3D? And everything else is transparent. So in case I have walls in front of those doors, I will be able to see through them. So I'm just going to say okay to this. You will notice now the whole model change into transparent, and some of those doors throughout the model have changed to be red in 3D as well. So these are the doors that are less than 800 mil. So I can easily pick those doors and just change them to be more than 800 so that they all comply with the standards. So this is the end of my part one. I'm just going to switch to part two. So in this part two, I'm going to focus on the workflows in ArchiCAD. So how you should be starting up your project, which settings you need to be setting up. So we'll start with a conceptual mesh modeling stage, and then we're going to make our way up all the way to the construction. So what's the first step you do when you start up a project? You receive a 2D DWG file as a site plan. Like I previously told you, we have worksheets in ArchiCAD. They're completely independent. Anything coming from the outside sources 2D, dump them onto the worksheets. That's exactly what I've done. So if I just double click on where it says site plan, so this is one of those websites that I paid for to get that site plan in 2D DWG format. So if I just click on them, you will notice they're all just polylines and lines and so on. I wasn't bothered. I didn't spend time to check if all the lines were enclosed. That's not the end of the world. When I start doing my mesh modeling with the magic wand will always close those areas, let's say from the furthest, from the quickest route ever. So they don't need to be completely enclosed. So I just cleaned up a little bit. So I got rid of the text and the labels, any annotations. I just deleted them or turned them off. This is a 10-story building. So the second thing I had to do was to set up my story. So I already had my 10-story story set up. I'm just going to switch back to my floor plan, ground floor. You see that because the site plan is natively on a worksheet, I can't see it, but that's not the end of the world. We have a palette in ArchiCAD called Trace Reference. If I just now turn it on, you will see that anything that I trace will be visible in my actual floor plan. And the nice thing about it is when I drag my mouse onto any of those corners, I get a tick next to my arrow, so I can actually snap to the elements coming from the trace reference, even though they're not active on my floor plan. So because this mesh modeling is the thing that you will do in all of your projects, this is going to prove you the power of favorites. I have already created a couple of favorites using my slab tool. So just because it's called slab, you don't need to use it just for floors. You can use it as ceilings, as mesh modeling, so as the buildings around you and so on. So that's exactly what I've done. If I click on that little arrow, do you see I already saved some favorites to represent the pavements, the grasses, existing buildings, roads, and so on. So all I need to do now is double click on the road and magic wand that slab onto that road. That's it. It's now a 3D road with a certain thickness. When I switch to 3D, I'll be able to see it with a different material assigned to it in 3D as well. So technically, literally within a minute, I could just mesh model the entire site plan. So let's go for the pavements. I double click on it and I just magic wand the pavements wherever I see the pavements. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but let's do it partially. Okay, oops. That's better. Let's go for some grasses. So I'm gonna again double click on the grass tool. And I'm just magic wanding all my slabs as grass, both in 2D and 3D. So let's assume these are the back gardens of those buildings. Okay, and let's put some existing buildings. Do you see they all have different colors? When I switch to 3D, they will all have different materials assigned to them as well. They will all have different heights, different thicknesses. Okay, so let's finish it like that. So let's double check what we have created. And there you go. So there's my mesh model in 3D. You will see that I've got different materials in 3D, different thicknesses assigned to them in 3D. These are still editable, fully editable. So these are all just single story buildings, but you could click on those black nodes and you can stretch them. So in case you have 5-story buildings, 2-story buildings, and so on, or you could previously save them as favorites as well. So we have a specific tool in ArchiCAD just for the mesh modeling as well called Morph. So Morph is quite similar to SketchUp in a way. So it's just for push and pull, for, follow me to define a path and just follow that path. So Morph is quite useful on a conceptual stage in case you're interested in the area scheduling as well. So let's assume that this is the footprint of my building. I'm going to magic wand my Morph here as well. And let's see what I have placed in 3D. Do you see it just places, when I magic wand the Morph, it just places a flat surface for me to push and pull. So I'm just going to click on the surface, and on the pet palette, I'm just going to push and pull that surface. As you can remember, we can snap to the story level, so it's going to be a 10-story building. Whichever surface you click on, do you see I can just push and pull that surface. To make it more interesting, I'm going to twist this building. So you can pick the surfaces, surface by surface actually. So what I've done here is I just picked up the top surface, and I'm going to rotate just the top surface, leaving the footprint as it is. And if I now go back to my stories, you will notice I will get the projected version of each story, story by story. And the nice thing about this Morph tool is if I now want a schedule, an area schedule quickly, I'm going to call it area. Say OK. The element type is a morph. And one of the fields that a morph specific field on a schedule is area by story. And if I do the sum here to give me the overall area, let's go and find that schedule. There you go. So I can add different fields to this schedule as well, but this is, I think, this is enough for the conceptual stage to get you going. So once you decide on the shape, what's the next step? You start drawing your grids. So we have a grid tool in ArchiCAD in which you can place all the grids one by one, or we actually have a grid system in which I can define the grid positions both horizontally and vertically, so I can add more, I can change the distances. But the nice thing about this is if I want the skeleton all together, all on 10 stories all at once, this is perfect tool. So this says, do you want to put columns where the grids intersect? Yes. And I can actually go into the settings of those columns and define what type of columns that I want to go for. So let's go for a conceptual one, a rectangular column. Do you want beams? Yes. And again, I could go into the settings of the beams. Let's go for a rectangular beam as well. Do you want dimensions between each grid? Yes. Do you want the overall dimension? Yes, I want them all. And because this is a 10-story building, like I said, I don't want to do copy and paste story by story. I want to show everything all on stories. So if I say OK to this, do you see it comes up with the grid structure? All I need to define here is the project north. And once I say OK, it will come up with this grid system. These are all individual elements as well. So in case you have a shorter beam here, you just make your beam shorter. In case you don't have a column here, you just delete that column. That's it. Yeah. So let's see what I have placed in 3D. I'm just going to place a mark here around this building. And let's say fit. There you go. So this is my structure, my skeleton all together. In case you want to change things all at once, so let's make them steel structures. I don't need to draw them from scratch. If I go to the options menu, I can actually insert standard steel profiles. I just need to define where I am or where that project is. So if I go for British, I can define the geometry shape that I'm going to insert in. And these are all the structure, the steel structures that UK uses. So if I just go for those three, let's say, all I need to say is add the profile, use the metal, say import, and done. So if I want to change all my rectangular columns to be steel structure, I highlight my column tool, I pick up all the columns all together, go into the settings all together, and change it from a conceptual rectangular column to be a steel column. So in this, you will see those three column types, the steel types that I have inserted. So I just go for one, say OK, and you will notice all my columns now have changed into that steel structure altogether. So I could have done the same thing with the beams. I could highlight my beam tool, pick them all up, go into the settings. The same information is here as well. So those three beams structure that I have inserted. So I can change my beams to be steel beams as well. Yeah, and the rest is just what I've done in my first part. I'm going to finish this demo with my third part. So this is going to be just on the collaboration side, so interoperability bit. So if I just switch to my part 3, this is a project of one of our clients in the UK. This is just a mixed-use commercial. It's just a complex of buildings. So it's the stories at the bottom are just commercial, so they're just retails, and the towers at the top is residential as well. So this is just to show you how you can communicate with the other disciplines, with the other, with your structural guy or your MEP guy. So everything that you see here is just the architectural information. So these are just walls. You will also notice that I only have my floor finishes and my ceilings, but I'm missing my structural slab, the structural information, because I'm expecting an IFC from my structural guy because it's his responsibility. So I have received some IFCs and I have inserted them into ArchiCAD. So they're coming all from different softwares. Through the layers, because ArchiCAD works with layers, I can actually visualize things in 3D. So if I just go for the structural layer combination, you will see that on the beams, columns and piles and slabs, which are coming from another software, coming from my structural guy as IFC into ArchiCAD. But the nice thing about this is within ArchiCAD, we have some translators to make the transition as smooth as possible. So if I go to my file, interoperability, IFC, and into my IFC translators, there are a lot of translators for import and export, and they're for different disciplines as well. So within each import or within each export, there are different settings already predefined so that it's a smoother transaction as well. So within these translators, you can define whether you want these elements to insert to be objects or native ArchiCAD elements. So do you see, if I highlight this slab now, this is an ArchiCAD slab. And if I go into the settings of that slab, that means I can edit it, which you shouldn't, but I can. And if I go to the properties of that slab, whatever it's been tagged with in the other software, I will see the information, the element information coming from it as well. So I'm not missing any geometry or any information coming from the other discipline. So in case I want to check if this slab sits exactly where it's supposed to sit, again, through the layer combinations, I could just go for architectural and structural, say OK. So I will see both disciplines now. Just to double check if the height of the slab is in the correct location. In terms of global X and global Y, it's in the correct location as well. So if you just bear with me, you will notice now I got my both structural and architectural information. So if I just highlight the same slab here, you will see that it actually sits exactly right underneath my floor finish as well. So that means the coordination between the engineers and the architect was correct. And so I can continue. I can do the reference modeling. I can continue with my reference modeling in my ArchiCAD file. So I also have the MEP model for it as well. So I could check if the ducts and the pipes are in the correct location as well. So, but this is the process that you need to be doing when you're collaborating with the other disciplines. So you need to have a meeting before you exchange your models actually to define to agree on the coordinates in terms of delta X, delta Y, and C levels. And once something is decided, each discipline starts drawing their drawings in their own platforms. And through the IFCs, you just exchange the information. So that's it from me. I'm just going to hand it back to John so he can close it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Pelin. That was a lot of information in 45 minutes. If you'd like a specific demo or you'd like to try this yourself, there are a number of ways you can do that. And also, we've had a couple of questions and we'll get back to you on those straight after the webinar. I'd like to thank you for attending the webinar. We hope you found it useful. You'll be able to contact us through Dan at Axonware, and we'll send you also a link though so that you can download and use ArchiCAD free for 30 days. We promised 45 minutes. We've taken up 45 minutes of your time. I hope it's given you something to think about, and please do come back to us if you've got any questions. Thank you.